all the newspapers and magazines, they depend on their advertisers. And I was told when I came out with my article on trans fats, which was a groundbreaking article that I wrote for Gourmet Magazine, which was a big magazine in its day. It doesn't exist anymore. But Ruth Reichel, who was the editor-in-chief of that magazine, said it was one of the articles that made her the most nervous to publish. And she was consequently the most proud for having published it. But Procter Gamble, a major manufacturer of vegetable oils, threatened to pull their advertisement if she published that article.
It's going to be a really neat behind the scenes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Because something always magical happens.
Wait, what? Did you just make that up? Hey, it's Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert. Listen each week as I talk with someone new. The topics are as ADD as I am, but they'll inspire you to stay curious and grow. Big thanks to our location sponsor, the UWF Historical Trust.
Hey, Curiositors, it's me, Meredith. Did you have a good Thanksgiving? Did you swap the Crisco for real butter after hearing last week's episode? Kerrygold, baby. That's the best butter there is, and good for me, it was actually BOGO at Publix. Well, this part 2 with Nina Teicholz heats up right away when she talks about the backlash and threats that she got as a result of publishing her research. Buckle up, because it is strange that adults would act this way over nutrition of all things. And while this episode doesn't constitute medical advice, it is an invitation to participate in your health, because after all, you're the only one who lives in your body. And I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions after this, so that's why Nina and I will be going live on Instagram this week. So be sure you're following me on Instagram at Meredith for Real. And if you're a loyal curiositor, you are my people. Thank you so much for staying curious and growing alongside me. And if you are also an iPhone owner, I would love it if you gave the show a rating and a review. If you're not sure what to say, you can always just share what your favorite episode is. And if you're new here, nice to meet you. I started this podcast in 2019 as a project to inspire people to choose curiosity over judgment. Each guest brings a personal development opportunity along with their story so you can stay curious and grow. There's no particular order to listen to episodes, so just have a look around and hit play on whatever grabs your attention. All right, everyone, enjoy the show. Welcome back to part 2 of my chat with Nina Teicholz. In part 1, we covered some important things like health definitions and some very compelling but undertold data. In today's chat, we're going to cover more of the drama and controversy and how it unfolded more like an A&E special and less like, well, you would expect scientists to behave. Thank you again, Nina, for coming back.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So the saga continues. Tell us about the pushback that you got as you were researching and publishing papers for your book.
I think that I knew that I was in hot water researching this book from the very beginning when I was researching actually trans fats. I thought I was going to write a book on trans fats, and I started calling people who research dietary fat. And this was in the early 2000s, and we really have come a long way in the sense, like the last 20 years, things have opened up a lot. But back then, you could not have a conversation with somebody challenging the low-fat diet. They would say, I can't talk to you about this. If you're going to take this line of thinking, I'm just going to hang up on you.
What?
And I talked to researchers, a researcher on trans fats who said, I would present my results, but I would get heckled so much at meetings, name calling and calling out at meetings. And then I subsequently found the experts who had been paid by the vegetable oil companies to heckle people at meetings when they came up with findings that were challenging to vegetable oils, which are, their products.
That doesn't even sound real. That sounds like something out of a drama.
Yeah, it is. It's like the Wild West. I mean, I had grown up in a family. My father was an engineer, and we would have these extremely highly rational conversations over the dinner table about science. And I always thought, well, it just moves forward methodically. And if the observations change, the hypothesis change. But here I was hearing stories about that were just so just the opposite of that. And it was very disorienting. I also heard a story from a woman about how somebody called up the journal and tried to get her paper retracted before it was even published. Well, let's just fast forward to today. This is still going on. Those bullying tactics, which include, like, if you don't like somebody's views, you launch ad hominem attacks at them, such as you say they're being paid off by the food industry, or you say that they're know nothing, or these really low level attacks were launched at people. This is happening in spades today all the time. It's like nutrition science grew up with bullying, which was a tactic that was developed by, or at least one of its greatest, who exercised it the most was Ancel Keys, who we talked about in the last episode, who was one of really the most influential nutrition scientists in the history of the 20th century. But this idea of bullying your way to get your view in nutrition continues. It's happened to me. When my book came out, I was attacked. I was called by somebody who used to be affiliated with Yale but is no longer. But he called me a parasite of science.
Wow.
He said I was an animal unlike he had ever seen, which is, calling people animals is sort of practically a Nazi style tactic to demonize the enemy. I have had multiple people accuse me of being tied to the meat industry. A very famous professor, Marion Nessel at NYU, continues to call up reporters and it's a whisper campaign is what it's called. You whisper in their ears and you say, oh, she's she's being paid by the meat industry. I have friends who've called me to say, do you know what this woman is saying about you? So this is very typical. And it happens not just to me. It happens to there's one of the most rigorous set of review papers ever to come out on the subject of red meat, which is now very controversial, right? And there are very strong groups lined up against red meat. Just all sorts of interests, including, the hundreds of millions of dollars that we've been hearing about, all the fake meats. Well, they do not want regular natural meat to be okay to eat. Their whole business model depends on vilifying it. So they actually, when these papers were going to come out, they issued a letter writing campaign to try to get these papers retracted before they were even published, to say these are too dangerous even to come out. They'll be so harmful if they come out.
That is crazy.
Based on nothing, really. Based on nothing other than they disagreed with the conclusions. I myself did a paper where there was a huge effort to try to get it retracted because I made a certain number of observations about the faulty science in our dietary guidelines. And even though they tried incredibly hard to get that paper retracted, they could not. And all of the main allegations of the paper remain true. And are the only place in the world where they're documented in peer-reviewed literature. So this goes on. And in fact, there was an article not too long ago by a researcher from the CDC, a very high-up researcher who was hassled and heckled for her work, and and insulted for her, her weight. You really cannot make this stuff up.
Wow.
Except for it's going on. And the only way to understand it is, I think, number one, it's a tradition in nutrition science that is, it just grew up as part of the field. Number two, that the magnitude of the interest in this field is so huge. When you talk about the entire food industry, the entire pharmaceutical industry, which makes all of its money off of long-time chronic diseases, those 4 or 5 medications a day that the average American takes to manage their chronic disease. If you are able to reverse that disease, that is not a good thing for the pharmaceutical industry. So they're interested. There's multiple other groups and other interests. There are now, if we can blame cows for climate change, then that gets oil and gas off the hook. And so you have all the real climate change wrongdoers who are trying to cast aspersion on cows, and those are huge interests, some of the biggest interests in the world. So it's really a hard field in which to hear and see the truth
and be an outlier.
It's a hard field to operate in. But I mean, I'm thinking of your listeners and viewers. It's hard to get good information because all the newspapers and magazines, they depend on their advertisers. And I was told when I came out with my article on trans fats, which was a groundbreaking article that I wrote for Gourmet Magazine, which was a big magazine in its day. It doesn't exist anymore. But Ruth Reichel, who was the editor-in-chief of that magazine, said it was one of the articles that made her the most nervous to publish. And she was consequently the most proud for having published it. But Proctor Gamble, a major manufacturer of vegetable oils, threatened to pull their advertisement if she published that article.
Well, what I don't understand is, I mean, I understand how, like, it's what you said in the last episode. It was a very big web of people with vested interests, all, a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It would be like the Southern version of that.
Right.
But what I don't understand is, if this has been the number one killer of Americans since about the 50s or the 60s, and I remember reading in your book or hearing in another interview you saying that it was a state of emergency when President Eisenhower had a heart attack, everyone really felt motivated to address this issue of heart disease. Emergencies are supposed to be short term. Like, why are we still here? And if we're still here and it's not only killing 500,000 Americans a year, but that number is growing as evidenced by the 2020 number of 700,000 people dying of heart disease, why are we still wasting time arguing and covering things up? And like, I feel like we would be incentivized to find the truth instead of just going back and forth arguing about it.
I'll just give you a little thought experiment.
Please.
Imagine, go back to the 1980s when the AIDS epidemic was raging and people were dying right and left. Now imagine if the AIDS epidemic had only gotten much, much, much worse in those intervening decades. And it was killing many more people. And the whole public health community and everybody was just silent on the issue. They weren't even talking about it. If you think back to our Republican and Democratic conventions not too long ago, there was not a single mention of obesity or diabetes or heart disease or cancer, the greatest killers our nation has ever seen, in that I could see in any of those speeches. So, if this were AIDS, somebody would say, hey, time out. We are not getting this right. We need to start over. And we need to, if it were 1847s crashing and landing and killing everybody on board every single day, somebody would say, hey, ground the planes. We need an investigation to see what works and what doesn't work. But instead, what we have is we have nutrition scientists who say, we're making a lot of progress. You actually read this in their papers where they say, progress has been made.
Oh, okay.
And when you say, like, well, what are the outcome measures? What are you pointing to? Every single disease, diet-related disease, is still increasing rapidly. And, obesity, diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is now epidemic. Hypertension, heart disease, cancer. I mean, it's just insane. So, and all of these have some diet-related component. Many pulmonary diseases also have some diet-related component. So, but there's just not. So instead, I think what the nutrition establishment, I would say the establishment and the medical establishment, their approach is to say, it is your fault, America. You eat too much junk food. You don't watch your weight well. You don't exercise enough. And they turn the blame around to the individual, which is, I think is unfair, given that if you look at the studies, the rigorous studies on our guidelines on how to eat well, eat fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, low fat, lean protein, low-fat cheese, not too much meat, not too much protein, 1 egg a day, whatever. What is considered a healthy diet? If you take that diet and you test it on people, you will not find, and it's been tested multiple times in multiple studies, and none of those studies show that those people on that diet do any better in terms of their health than people who have followed a diet higher in sugar and fatty foods. You don't see that diet works. So we're working with a diet that has been proven to not produce healthy people. And yet we're still told, the average person is told, it's your fault.
Hey everyone, just a quick interruption to show gratitude to our sponsors and give you some special deals.
The UWF Historical Trust. We shoot the show at the Museum of Commerce and the Pensacola Museum of History. And it's not just an amazing step back into the 18 and 1900s, but it's an event space too. And because they love creative collaborations and have spaces for all party sizes, they're pretty much the perfect venue to make your event stand out. So if you need a unique space in downtown Pensacola, take a look at historicpensacola.org. And if you want to tour one of the 12 museums, get your tickets in person so you can show the agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. Get emails by texting REAL to 66866. It seems like no one can agree on anything nowadays. But I have found the unifier to unite us all. Mosquitoes suck. Mine were so bad, they were in my car. Have you ever tried to swat a mosquito while driving? Not advised. Insect has been great because they guarantee their work and pollinator care is always top of mind. If you live in the Florida Panhandle or the Gulf Coast of Alabama, give them a call, ensec.net.
Now back to the show.
So it's just a really problematic system because nobody wants to admit that what they've been prescribing for decades and decades is doesn't work or is wrong.
They don't want to be liable for that. But we all want to be healthy. So there is potential for the normal Jane and Joe out there to be motivated to follow whatever. Like I think you even said in your book, Americans at least have really followed these recommendations to the letter. The percentage of red meat that has been consumed since like the 70s to now is, I think, half. Is that right?
It's down by 28%. And red meat is down by 35% since 1970. Butter is down by 19%. Whole milk is down by 79%. Everything we were told to decrease has decreased, and everything we were told to increase has increased. Our consumption of fruits and vegetables is up by, on average, 35%. We eat more whole grains. We've reduced refined grains. We eat less sugar. So everything that we've been told to do, we've done. There's not a single category of food where we have not changed our consumption habits in the direction that we've been told.
So we're compliant. We just need better information.
Right.
I'm curious with all of the research that you've done and how you're able to just spout out these facts. In another interview, I think you said like you read the research studies, for fun. Like you just would go through all of them. So you're very intimately acquainted with them. What do your conversations with your doctor look like?
Well, first of all, I don't go to the doctor very much. and that's because I'm healthy. I used to be, so I should just let your viewers know. I since my research, I have changed my diet and I now eat fewer carbohydrates. So I don't eat many starches. I try to keep, sugar down. And that also includes fruit because fruit most fruit has quite a lot of sugar in it. And so I have lowered my carbohydrates and I've increased, I now eat red meat, which I didn't do for more than 25 years. I eat regular fat, cheese, dairy. I eat tuna fish salad. So I've changed my diet a lot, but I say that because it used to be when I was on my previous pretty high carbohydrate diet and not a lot of just protein foods and not very much fat, of definitely a low fat diet. I would get sinus infections every year. I was constantly in to see my doctor. I had all kinds of skin problems. Things I just had no idea were associated with diet. But when I changed my diet, I really no longer got sick. I mean, knock on wood, I haven't been sick in, now, I don't know, 15 years. So I go to my doctor every few years to get a checkup. And he often, we often have a fight over how many screening exams I'm going to get. And he knows that I'm just doing what I'm doing. And he can't really object because all of my cholesterol numbers look great. And, he says I'm the only middle-aged woman he knows who's lost 10 pounds since he's been seeing her. And, he just can't really object. But what's interesting about, doctors is that he's really smart. My doctors are really smart. He's a great man. But they really are so locked into their ideas about that, a low carbohydrate diet must be bad. And they're more likely to maybe embrace something called intermittent fasting, where you limit the number of hours per day that you're eating. But they just have a hard time accepting a low carbohydrate diet. Even people who've lost hundreds of pounds and reversed their type 2 diabetes, and they go to their doctor and their doctor says, wow, that's quite, some improvement, but be careful on that dangerous low carbohydrate diet you're eating. So it's just this wild disconnect. I think you could say something about how the medical profession really no longer trusts, they're not taught to trust their own observations and really think for themselves. They're taught to prescribe medications, which is that's a sad state of things. But there are a lot of doctors who've sprung up in the last just even 5 years who will entertain alternative dietary approaches.
And how do you find those doctors? Because that's the most daunting thing for those of us that feel like we need, a point person for our health to go, okay, check my levels, do blood work, and then I'm going to go try this new lifestyle change, and then I'll check back in 6 to 8 months. How do you find doctors that are maybe more in the loop?
So we can post on your show notes. There's a couple of places. There are some websites that have developed really pretty good databases, including doctors all over the world. I don't know where all your listeners are, but and so there are practitioners, I think, pretty much in every state now that are on these networks, and you can look them up. It's nice to go to somebody who understands you, and also, if you decide to do something like the approach that I've taken to regain my health and weight, you need to know things like you need to eat more salt because your body metabolizes it differently. And that seems counterintuitive, but you need to know bits of information. And if you're coming off of medication, if you're, say, somebody with type 2 diabetes, and people find that they rapidly reduce the amount of insulin that they need when they reduce their carbohydrates, you need a doctor who is going to monitor that very closely. So there are good reasons to really have a doctor who knows what they're doing in this field.
And would they be able to recommend certain tests? Because the more I read about, what cholesterol numbers mean, how much weight we place on them, and then I heard about NLR particle test or something about oxidized LDLs. All of it is very dizzying. So would a doctor like that be able to lead a patient through the tests that matter, or is it up to we, the listeners, to know those tests and bring them to our doctor?
Okay, this is a huge topic that I'm not going to get into in too much detail, but I will tell you, for heart disease, of the regularly, commonly measured indicators, your HDL to your triglyceride ratio is the best and most reliable predictor of your risk. And that means your HDL needs to be pretty high and your triglycerides are low. HDL is reflective of your saturated fat intake. Actually, saturated fat is the best way to raise your HDL. Your triglycerides are driven by your carbohydrate content. So your sugar and things that turn into sugar once you digest them, like bread, rice, pasta, and sugary fruits. So in terms of other aspects of metabolic health, there is something called a Kraft test that is the best kind of test that you can get to see if you are en route to becoming diabetic, because most people develop this condition called hyperinsulinemia, which is something that doesn't show up in the regular tests that you're given to see if you have diabetes. They measure something called your HbA1c. That once you have elevated HbA1c, you have been pre-diabetic probably for at least 5 years, and you could have done something about it. So you really do want to catch that early. And then there's, just the look test, which is if you're gaining weight and you're, it's often that the origin of all these diseases causes, which is metabolic, excessive insulin and heightened blood sugars, elevated blood sugars. Those are the conditions that's from which spring all these diseases. So from that comes obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease. Some people think cancer as well, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And, how you get those conditions, it really varies by person. There are thin diabetics. There are people who are very overweight, who have normal blood sugars. So there's a lot of variation.
Interesting. There is a lot of variation, but I feel like you gave the listeners a lot, like some solid things that they can write down, and I will have it all written down in the email related to this episode. So if you're new to the show, every Saturday I send out an email with kind of cliff notes of what we talked about. So I'll have all the clickable resources that Nina mentioned, plus I'll have the bullet points if you're driving or multitasking while listening to this. That way you don't have to stop and write it down on your hand, and that probably wouldn't be safe anyway if you were driving. So as we wrap up, are there any other choose this, not that bullets that you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I think I would say choose to skip snacks, choose to let your body recover between meals. That's something that's very contrary to what we've been told, but choose to skip snacks, choose to have your children skip snacks. And also contrary to what we believed, instead of an apple, will spike your blood sugar, or an orange, have some cheese instead. Or even nuts are not so good. Nuts are very high in calories, and you can drive those calories up very quickly with nuts or seeds or peanut butters. All those are really high in calories. So your better option, and one that will fill you up more, is cheese, or if you eat it, salami or some kind of cured meat. That's a better choice. It's a better choice to have some kind of animal protein like fish or lamb or steak or chicken instead of pasta for dinner. And that's a better choice even if you can't afford the best, most high quality food. Even though we'd all like to eat that way, it's not always affordable, but it's still a better choice than pasta. It's a good choice to skip bread with your meals. We don't have it on our table and haven't for a really long time. And that's a better choice as well.
I agree. I haven't had, I just don't waste my calories on carbs so much because I don't feel good when I eat them. And so I love those recommendations. What about cooking oil? Like, should we be cooking with bacon grease instead of olive oil?
Okay. Well, I would definitely, it's a matter of affordability, but I definitely would cook with olive oil over any other kind of oil. And that's because it's less likely to oxidize. And even better than olive oil, if you can afford it, I would cook with a hard, solid fat, like coconut oil, ghee, butter, which burns. That's why there's ghee, takes out the burnable part. Or lard, or the bacon grease if you want to save it from your bacon, or you can now get lard and tallow and all the traditional fats that were used for cooking, universally used for cooking before the beginning of the 20th century. So all of those are less likely to oxidize, less likely to cause toxic oxidation products when they're heated, less likely to cause inflammation. And if you think that's crazy, then I really encourage you to read my book because it's quite a story. Nobody knows about vegetable oils. And you just read chapter 9 so that you understand how they came into our food supply and how they are toxic when heated.
And what I loved about your book is the detailed studies. It was so hard for me to pare down the questions to ask you today because this book was just so packed with so much knowledge and so much of the details of the research and why some of it was good and some of it was bad and how the American Heart Association first got their funding. I do highly recommend, if y'all want the behind the scenes, this is the book to get. So as we wrap up, tell people where they can find you, where they can find your book, and any other thoughts that you want to leave us with.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. My book, you can get at Amazon and leave a review. Thank you. I have a website, NinaTeicholz.com. I have a nonprofit that I direct called nutritioncoalition.us. We are the only group in the country trying to ensure that our guidelines are evidence-based. So please take a look, donate. And I'm most active on Twitter, where I am at Big Fat Surprise.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. This was great.
Thank you. It's been fun talking to you.
Thanks for listening. If you want Cliff Notes and clickable links to this episode, be sure to subscribe to my email list. If you're in the US, you can text REAL to 66866. And if you are an earthling elsewhere on Earth, you can go to meredithforreal.com. And if you liked this episode, you'll also like the one about the lumberjack-looking man who teaches breathwork as a stress solution. That's episode 64. Stay tuned next week when a friend of mine will guest host and interview me. Talk to you then.